Hi, my name is Vivien NicUldoon. I'm going to show you the design process I went through to get a Scythian-inspired coat that I've always wanted for the SCA. I've been in the SCA for quite a few years, and I've always been really intimidated by these amazing creations people have put together that are inspired by known artifacts, and I didn't know how to get into how you actually do all of the steps that go with creating that. So I'm going to show you what the people who have been working with me have taught me how to do and how I've sort of stumbled through figuring out how to make the thing that I want to wear. This is the book I used for the inspiration for the embellishments on my coat. So this is a kaftan bind, and it's the back of a sort of a coat. And you can see it's got these cool stags on it. So it's got the stag's head and then these really cool horns he's got. And they're actually these anamorphic things that look like birds. So I really liked the anamorphic part of it. I love that it's got all of these organic looks to it. So the line isn't, it's not an even width all the way up. It sort of wobbles back and forth. The birds on it are all different sizes. They have different amounts of curl in them. Sometimes the back of their feathers or whatever that back piece is, sometimes it's straight, sometimes it's curved up. About the only thing they all have in common is the beak is always pointed down. It's never pointed up, but sometimes they're grouped together, sometimes they're individual. It also has this long bar on each side, so it does have that in common on both of them. The ears aren't even the same between these two guys. So I like that it was really organic. I didn't have to worry about doing an exact duplicate because this is clearly, somebody doing it in some variety of freehand with no exact symmetry to it. So what I did was I got a roll of this brown paper. So this is the stuff that you wrap packages in. You get it by the roll for like $6 at Fred Meyer's. It's really inexpensive. It's great for sketching on. So what I did was take regular lead pencil, one of these gum erasers. This is the eraser I liked best for getting the pencil off the paper when I didn't like what I'd done. Keeping the pencil sharp made it easier. And what I did was sketch until I got a design that I really liked. The piece of paper that I used, I made sure was the size of what I had available on the back of the coat. So the coat I'm starting with, the Shoxy made it for me, and she gave me this fantastic blank slate for me to do all of this embellishing learning on. So when I sketched until I got something I really liked, I had this stag, and you can see I put my own embellishments on it because I liked it. So I did stuff like, this is a shape that shows up other places in other finds that are in there. It's not exactly like what they have in there, but it's a similar sort of aesthetic. And then you can see these are the birds that I did. So the way I like them, they all tend to have a little bit more of an uplifted ear to them on the ear bits. And then I put an extra curl on the end of the long strip that came down because I liked it. I also changed his eye a little bit just because I like this shape eye better than the one that they had. I also, because I wanted something on the front of the coat and we don't know what the front of the kaftan looked like, I have these two pieces that are in the same aesthetic that aren't from that piece. There's nothing quite like them in any of the pieces, but it's in the same aesthetic, and I could believe that somebody would put this on the front of theirs just like they did an embellishment on the back. So these are going to go down the two fronts of it, and they've got the birds again, and they're long strips, one for each side. So when they were all ready, when I liked the shape of them, I used a harder pencil line to make sure that I was looking exactly at the lines I was going to cut, and then I cut them all out. So when I had them cut out, I laid them on the coat to make sure that it was still what I wanted it to look like. And what I found was, even though I'd measured the actual size that was available, it didn't fit well into the shape of the coat. So after a little frustration and some conversations with Ludviga, she just told me to, and it's fighting me because it's all been rolled up for about a month. So while it's trying to get away, you can see it's got these pieces of tape on it where we cut it apart and then pieced it back together with tape. I didn't have to recreate the whole thing. It's just the paper pattern, so treat it like any other pattern, cut it where you need to, tape it back together, and then use it. So the next step was this is pleather. I've never used pleather before. The reason I'm using it is because I don't want to spend dozens of hours on a piece of clothing that I want to wear and then worry that the first time I spill something on it, I'm going to ruin it. I want to be able to wear it and enjoy it and not worry about it. So because pleather is washable, I'm using pleather and not leather. So, and the color, by the way, the Scythians use the most amazing Muppet colors. I can't even imagine how garish some of their stuff must have been. So I really like the whole contrast of the deep blue and the bright red. So the next step in the project was, I've got the papers all cut out. Now I need to get it onto the pleather. So I use the Heat and Bond. I've only ever used Heat and Bond for wool and cotton before. I've never used it with pleather. So with wool and cotton, it's really reliable. It's really forgiving. Pleather melts, so you have to be a lot more careful with it, which I knew but didn't appreciate fully. So the first thing you do is you get the Heat and Bond, you do the first layer onto the pleather, and it bonds to it, and you still have a piece of paper basically on the back of the Heat and Bond. And with that piece of paper, I could take the pattern, tape it on. I use cellophane tape to tape it on, and then I used my pencil and just traced around again. So I had that exact pattern on the back of the Heat and Bond. Take my pattern off, and then you have this pattern you need to cut out. And you need to cut it out pretty precisely because you don't want any little nicks or anything, because those will show forever on the back of whatever you're working on. So I got 2 new pair of scissors. I didn't realize that's what these little bits were for. I'd never had a project that needed them before. So these are Amazon scissors, not expensive again. These little guys are super sharp. They have a nice tiny point and they have a curve in them, so you can kind of get around some of the curves that you want to do. And this one is of a similar size, but it's got a straight blade for different areas. And what I did was use the big scissors to get around the big pieces and then go back and very carefully cut the smaller bits out. I just kind of went back and forth between whatever scissors felt more comfortable in my hand while I was doing a particular part. Once it was all cut out, I put it on the back of the wool and I ironed it on. This is when I found out that my iron was worn out, when it did a fascinating thing with the temperature and melted a section of the pleather. I'd been using a pressing cloth to protect the pleather. It still wasn't enough. And that's when I learned that you always keep your pattern until the project is completely done, because I had to recreate a whole section. And it turns out you can scrape pleather, melted pleather off of wool. It takes a little time, but you can do it. And then replace it with a new piece. The good news is, once I'm all done and I have some of the plaques on, you'll never know which section I did that to. So, yay. Once it was all cut, once it was ironed onto the wool, I started stitching it, and this is where I'm at now. So I'm running about 8 stitches to the inch right now. I'm working on my consistency. The way I stitch it on is I go up through the pleather, go straight up through the pleather, straight across, and then back down again right next to it. So this entire section is all stitched down, and from 1.5 feet away, you can't see the stitches. So I'm using matching thread, which it's modern thread, but I'm going to do embellishments on top of it. So the purpose of what I'm doing right now is just to secure it, to make sure that it doesn't shift at all and it's completely attached to the wool forever. The next step, after I get done with all the stitching, I've probably got another 15 hours or so of stitching, just getting it all stitched down front and back. And then the next step is making the plaques so I can make it shiny. But that's how I got all set up and how I got into the design, and breaking the pieces down piece by piece so I can do projects like this in the future. I hope you'd enjoyed.